In a video I did in September, I showed a clip of Sweden's so-called public service broadcaster, SVT, publicly denouncing Jimmy Åkesson, the leader of the nationalist Sweden Democrats, for simply stating that immigrants generally find it harder to get jobs in Sweden because they often do not fit in. SVT is no longer a public service broadcaster and hasn't been for some time. It is a politicized leftist media operation that is selling the Swedish people their own demise. And it is dedicated to maintaining the conspiracy of silence that shrouds the death of Europe. So imagine my reaction when I read that SVT will now be funded by a mandatory tax on all working people in Sweden. Previously, it was funded by a yearly license fee of about $265 a year, paid by every household with a TV. Now, everyone with a job will pay, regardless of whether or not they have a TV or use the service at all. The fee will literally be deducted from working people's paychecks, and as it stands, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Public service broadcasters in Sweden are clearly desperate to secure their existence. Around 15% of those with a TV refuse to pay the fee, and just think of all those pesky people that don't even have the decency to have TVs. Why should they escape paying for state-approved propaganda? The Swedish state is desperately trying to dominate the public space in the digital age. It's losing control, and it's afraid. As Swedish Culture Minister Alice Bah Kuhnke said last year, quotes, "We as customers have changed our behavior. How should public service approach social networks? It's crucial that we work out conditions which work in the reality we live in," unquote. And this isn't the first time we've seen this sort of desperation by the state propaganda machine. In 2013, Radiotjänst, the agency responsible for collecting the license fee, decided that it was not good enough for only those who owned a TV to have to pay the fee. No, everyone in possession of a computer and smartphone were also to pay the fee. Thankfully, this extortion was later struck down in the courts, but as we can see with this latest move, they simply found a better way to impose their increasingly politicized programming on the populace. All the elected parties except the Sweden Democrats voted for the move. And why wouldn't they? They are all staunch supporters of perpetual third world immigration and the assured end of their nation. These traitors and their propaganda arms speak as one. Democracy is being used to slowly strangle white nations, and Swedish nationalists are now being made to pay not only for the migrant invasion forced upon them, but also for the state propaganda machine to lie about it. As I read this story, I was reminded of the very new political terrain in which Sweden and the rest of the West finds itself. I considered how, in the Sweden of perhaps only 10 years ago, this license fee change may have been relatively uncontroversial. But this is not the West of 10 years ago. It's a different world. When Sweden, when any Western country was homogeneous, political differences could of course be serious, but they at least occurred within an established national and cultural framework that everyone accepted and understood. Debates about whether taxes should be increased or reduced, the finer points of education policy, or whether to privatize a utility are as nothing compared to the political questions of today. As multiculturalism tightens its grip on our daily lives, we now find ourselves wrestling with questions such as what nationhood really means and whether nations should even have a right to exist. We find ourselves overrun by people with whom we mostly have no contact and certainly no racial, cultural or historical link. But we are now told by the powers that be that these people are as much members of our nations as we are. We are told that we are all one, so it doesn't matter which sort of people populate our territory in the future. We are told that our blood is nothing special, while also being told to honor the racial and ethnic identities of other groups. In these times, the real political debate is centered around the issues of migration and national identity. It's what Brexit was all about. It's the reason the one thing all Trump supporters really want him to do is to build the wall. It would be an international symbol of our longing for and right to nationhood, a billion-dollar monument to nationalism and a trigger for nationalist revival. This is why the forces of globalism will throw everything at stopping its construction. If Trump leaves office and that wall is not built, his presidency will have been for naught. To understand nation is to understand the importance of blood, and that nothing can replace it. We all of us know it, no matter how much some pretend they don't. So we are not talking about policy differences anymore. We are not even talking about ideological differences. We are talking ultimately about the survival or destruction of everything we are as Europeans. Our current political system is like being conjoined with a suicidal maniac. It has been hijacked by people who believe white people no longer play any useful role in the world. As things stand, they run the show, and they've got a real problem with us being around. I saw a video recently of Americans being refused entry into America because of the Mexico border closure, Trump's attempt to combat the globalist-funded migrant caravan. Consider such an inconvenience merely a tiny foretaste of the upheaval to come. And no matter how bad things become for normal people, the globalists will not stop. Indeed, this is the anger they literally banked on creating. They see their global order emerging from this chaos, and their plan is unfolding before our very eyes all over the West. We can expect many more signs of this intractable conflict over the coming years. The system will shore itself up more brutally as the democratic consensus breaks down entirely. This plan was designed for us all. It is the reason all Western nations are going through this at the same time. Despite the terrible consequences already caused by the migrant invasion, we are now staring the UN Migration Compact squarely in the face. This compact is the blueprint for the perpetual channeling of third world migrants into the West, regardless of the consequences. It is the legal framework for the end of nation states as we know them. In the UN's own words, it is a way of making third world migration to the West, quotes, safe, orderly, and regular, unquote. Sounds an awful lot like negotiating the terms of our surrender, no? The idea of hate speech is a thing created by the contradictions of multiculturalism to perpetuate the contradictions of multiculturalism. It is a suppressive tool to gloss over a society fundamentally uneasy with itself. And the UN Migration Compact will extend the scope of hate speech to include any criticism of migration at all. Take a look at this video of MEP Marcel de Graaf explaining the implications of the compact.
And I'd like to say some words on the Global Compact on Migration. On the 10th and 11th of December, there will be an international congress in Marrakesh, Morocco. With regard to this Global Compact on Migration, and the participating countries are set to sign this agreement. And although this joint agreement isn't binding, it's still meant to be the legal framework on which the participating countries commit themselves to build new legislation. And one basic element of this new agreement is the extension of the definition of hate speech. The agreement wants to criminalize migration speech. Criticism of migration will become a criminal offense. And media outlets, and that also concerns you, that give room to criticism of migration can be shut down. The Compact for Migration is legalization of mass migration. It's declaring migration as a human right. So in fact, it will become impossible to criticize Ms. Merkel's welcome migrants politics without being at risk to be jailed for hate speech. So this agreement, to our humble opinion, is a coup d'etat of pro-migrant liberal globalists. And it will greatly benefit multinationals. Because, you know, countries who import the third world will become the third world. And it's absolutely clear, and you all know that in third world countries, multinationals dictate the rules.
In summary then, the powers that be are constantly changing the rules to squeeze us into an ever tighter corner. If we don't volunteer to pay for their televised propaganda, they will deduct the money from our pay packets. And if we want to speak out about the grim realities of multiculturalism, they will invent new ways to put us in jail for it. It's important to understand that we are in a process, the end point of which is to simply silence all dissent against the global, post-national order they wish to create. This is a battle for hearts and minds. It's a battle for our survival. It is our duty to get out the truth about what is being done to us, why it is being done to us, and the terrible consequences that will continue to result. There is nothing else to be done but to keep working. Activism must become a way of life for all those who are part of this movement. If we reach enough people, we win. Until next time, be well.